Hello and welcome to part 2 for this week. This section, we're going to be looking at some of these consumer psychology models. So, consumer responses to service encounters. And we're going to look at how the things that we've designed, so the servicescapes which we designed, the physical elements of our extended marketing mix, how they can actually impact our customers. So, environmental psychology studies how people respond to specific environments, and then we can apply and develop these theories to understand and manage services marketing. So feelings are a key driver of customer responses to service encounters, and there's two important models that we're going to look at, so these theories. So the first one is the Meribum-Russell's stimulus response model, and the second one is Russell's model of effect. So you can see here that this guy here, Russell, is a key player in this environmental psychology, and a lot of the work that he's done. So you might have actually come across these models previously in marketing and consumer behaviour and stuff like that, and they're quite popular, and a lot of other theories that sort of built on top of this. So first of all, let's look at this stimulus response model. So here we have an environmental, this is quite simple, but we have here the model of environmental responses. So we have an environmental stimuli and cognitive processes. So cognitive processes are the way that we think and the way that we rationalise and the way that we basically compute, our brain computes things about what's going on. And then we've got these dimensions of effect. Now effect, it's not effect, it's affect. So affects is emotions, our mode, states of mood, right? So we have two dimensions of here, which is pleasure, and actually it's more of a crosshairs thing because you can have pleasure and then displeasure. So where it's nice pleasure or bad pleasure, and then you have arousal, which is heightened arousal, which is excitement, or disarousal, which is actually boredom. So the environmental stimuli and cognitive processes align with these or feed into these dimensions of effect, and then we get these response behaviours. And these response behaviours are either approach, so when it makes us want to approach or stay at a servicescape in a physical environment, or it makes us want to avoid it and then have these negative cognitive processes as well, where we go, oh, I don't really want to be there. Your thinking is like negative, and then your attitude is bad as well. So thinking, processing, all those things, those attitudes are cognitive processes. Now I'm going to give you an example here. So if you go into a shop and the environmental stimuli is very loud music, and it's louder than what you'd like. So you go through this process, you go, oh, this is loud music, then your attitude starts to change towards that service environment. So then your dimensions of effect then, rather than being a pleasurable place to be, you actually, it's displeasurable. So you feel your modes of effect, you feel unhappy and, well, not really angry, but you feel frustrated too, right? Now, but your arousal actually increases because the environment isn't soothing, it's not boring, it's unpleasant, but it's also lifts your blood pressure and makes you want to do something, right? So then your response behaviours is you want to get out of there, stay there as least as possible, and then you avoid the place. On the other situation, if you go to a cafe and then it's got a very nice smell of chocolate in there and coffee, and you're like, oh, this is very pleasant. So the environmental stimuli, the things that we perceive or through our senses, that stimulate our senses, will have a positive reaction to it. So dimensions of effect then are pleasurable, so it's very nice, and our arousal is actually lifted as well. So then our response behaviours are we want to go into the shop or we want to stay in the shop, and then we actually have a positive attitude towards that place or that space. Right. So the model holds that the conscious and unconscious perception and interpretation of the environment influences how people feel. People's feelings in turn drive their responses to the environment, and then feelings are central to the model. Which, remember when we talk about consumer behaviour, we've got the tri-component model, we've got the way that people think, our cognitive parts, we've got our modes of effect, or our affective part, which is the way that we feel. Then we've got the connotative part, which is our impulsiveness to act on things, right? So out of those three things, we're saying that people's feelings drive, so it's not the way that we think about things, it's not our cognitive thing, it's the way that we feel that drives our response to the environment. So feelings are central to the model, which poses that feelings rather than perceptions or thoughts drive behaviour. So it's not our cognitive thing, it's our affective thing. Right, in environmental psychology, the typical outcome variable is approach and avoidance. And we're going to look at those coming up later. And for marketing, it's critically important because if people aren't coming into our business or into our store or into whatever wherever we're operating, if they're not coming in there, it's quite possible it's because we're generating avoidance behaviours rather than the approach behaviours. And this guy here, the Mirabum guy, he's this stimulus response model was published in this book here, an approach to environmental psychology. So if you want to go back and check that out, it might be good to include in your service audit. All right, now we have the next one. So this is Russell's model of effect, and it's basically a build on or a simplification or really expanding out of the other model. In here we talked about so it's got those two dimensions still, the pleasant and unpleasant. So before we just talked about pleasant, but now we've actually put it on the proper dimension, and we've got the arousal dimension going vertically, where it's the opposite of being aroused is being sleepy. Now you can see when you're aroused and pleasant, that's an exciting thing, right? It's not always, so like it's a pleasant place to be and it's exciting to be there. So the other one is it's pleasant and it's sleepy, so it's such as relaxation. So if you go to a day spa, if you're getting a massage or something like that, it's usually a rather sleepy, so you're not super excited. I mean, it's nice to be there, so it's pleasant, but it's not like you're super pumped up and excited, ready to go. No, you're nice and relaxed. So that's the other dimension, the quadrant here. Then the unpleasant and disarousal is boring, and you can have service experiences where, like if you just say you're going to your tax, do your tax, and your accountant's going through all your receipts and stuff like that. You know, it's something that you need to do, but it might be exceptionally boring for you. And there's plenty of services that can be boring. And if it's unpleasant and arousing, which means it's distressing. So, like if you go into the dentist or something like that, it's unpleasant. You don't like going there, but you still, your blood pressure's up. It's still you're aroused. Your senses are aroused. Right. So this has been published in this here, a circumplex model of effect by James A. Russell. By all means, it's been published in the Journal of Personal Social Psychology. So this Russell's model of effect is widely used to help understanding feelings in a service environment and suggests that emotional responses to environments can be described along two main dimensions, pleasure and arousal, which we've done. So pleasure is a direct subjective response to the environment depending on how much the individual likes or dislikes it, whereas arousal refers to how stimulated the individual feels, ranging from deep sleep, which is the lowest level, to the highest levels of adrenaline in the bloodstream. Arousal quality depends largely on the information rate or load of the environment. Excuse me. So that one's there. So let's have a look now at the affective and cognitive process. So affect can be caused by perceptions and cognitive processes of any degree of complexity. However, the more complex a cognitive process becomes, the more powerful it is in its potential to impact on that effect. So the way that we feel about it, or the way that our emotional response is to that. So most of the time, it is a simple cognitive process that determines how people feel in the service setting, which is the way that we think, our attitudes about things. These include consciousness and even unconscious perceptions of space, colour, scent, so on. Whereas when higher levels of cognitive processes are triggered, for instance through something surprising in the service environment, then it's the interpretation of this surprise that determines people's feelings. Because then we can't have a rational cognitive processing thought to it. We're surprised, so we immediately react to it through our senses, our feelings and modes of effect. Alright, now the behavioural consequence then, now we've learned about how important these modes of effect are on our customers. So pleasant environments attract people and draw them in, right? Whereas human beings, we like to be in nice situations, pleasurable situations. Unpleasant environments result in avoidance behaviours. And I just want to point out, it's not necessarily that they are unpleasant or pleasant, but it's the perception, so it's also the perception that it might be pleasant or unpleasant. So arousal acts as an amplifier of the basic effect of pleasure and behaviour, and loud and fast beat music can increase the stress levels of customers in a crowded shop. So now, loud and fast beat music, if it's pleasant for your customers, they're going to be stimulated in a positive way, excited, right? If it's unpleasant for them, they're going to be distressed and they're going to want to leave. So the same environment, having the same basically stimulus, different customers are going to react in different ways. So we can also use this to for our positioning and our target market, right? So if you're selling, just say if you're in a skate shop or skate and surf shop and you're trying to attract young people because they're the ones that come in and buy skateboards and skate clothing and stuff like that, the music that you play in that shop is going to be targeted towards those young people. And then older people are going to come in that aren't your target market, and they're going to go, well, it's not very pleasant in here. So you can actually select or help your target market to self-select into your service by your servicescape as well. In the other way, you might have classical music playing, for pensioners insurance company. You want to attract old people in there, so you can play the classics in there, and the old people go in there and they love it. It's beautiful. It's a nice, pleasant thing. You have classical art and all these things that old people like. So that's going to attract them in, whereas young people are like, oh, this music is not very pleasant, so that it's not going to attract them in. So for one segment, it can be attractive and attracts them into your servicescape. For another segment, it's going to push them away. Customers have a strong, effective expectation. So some services, such as romantic dinner or relaxing spa visit. It's important that the environment is designed to match customer expectations. Right, that's it for this section. I'm going to stop recording and I'll see you in the next one where we look at the servicescape model.